Okay, thank you everybody for coming today. We'll begin with Shelley taking the roll, please.
Gary.
Here.
Pepcorn.
Here.
Preston. Here. Strand.
Here.
Mahoney.
Here.
So the mayor's joining us by phone, and then he'll eventually be with us in person. And so with that, we'll begin. Maybe Nancy, you can direct how this all goes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Nancy Morris, Assistant City Attorney for the City of Fargo. This is the date and time set for the hearing on the liquor license issued to the International African Restaurant and Nightclub LLC. Mobalu Brown and Corey Schultz are identified as the owner of the license application. They have designated Mr. Daniel Kwame Omani as their representative and signed a statement delegating that authority to Mr. Omani to act on their behalf in these proceedings. Following notice of hearing, admission by Ms. Brown and Mr. Schultz on August 4th, Mr. Omani requested this expedited hearing today. The matter of the International African Restaurant and Nightclub was presented to the Liquor Control Board on June 29th, 2021. The newly constituted LCB found a violation of Fargo Municipal Code 25-1512B6. This section provides the commission may, in its discretion, suspend or revoke for cause any license issued under the provisions of this article. The grounds for suspension or revocation shall, among others, include the following. The licensee conducts his business in a manner which results in, encourages, or is conducive to the creation of the disturbances of the peace, disorderly conduct, or any other violations of federal, state, and/or city laws. The LCB recommended a 60-day suspension following the presentation of the evidence by Police Chief David Zawalski. International African Restaurant and Nightclub received email and regular mail notice of that hearing before the LCB. Attorney Stephen Baird appeared on behalf of the licensee at that time and presented testimony. The meeting of the City Commission held on July 1st determined cause existed for the immediate interim suspension of the license pending further hearing. Notice of such meeting was provided to the licensee, and Stephen Baird at that time appeared as the general manager of the licensee. The hearing today will follow essentially the same format. Steve Sprague, City Auditor, and Fargo Police Chief Zawalski will present information to the City Commission for further consideration of the International African Restaurant and Nightclub license. Representatives of the International African Restaurant and Nightclub will then be given an equal opportunity to present their testimony and respond to the position presented by the city. Following the submission of that evidence and testimony, the matter will be presented to the City Commission for deliberation and decision. The Commission may determine that the suspension already imposed pursuant to cause found shall serve as the entire consequence of the violation of 25-1512B6, may adopt the recommendation of the Liquor Control Board, may find some other suspension or alternative would be appropriate, or may revoke the license. In particular, Fargo Municipal Code Section 1215C provides that the grounds enumerated in subsection B above are not exclusive, and any license issued under the provision of this article may be suspended or revoked by the Commission for any other reason deemed by the Commission to be sufficient in order to promote and protect the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the people of the City of Fargo. At this time, I believe Steve Sprague will start the testimony with background information regarding the license and status of that license. Then Chief Zawalski will present that evidence, and then we'll turn the podium over to the licensee's representative for response to that evidence. Following that time, there will be an opportunity for questions, deliberation, and decision. We didn't set a timeline necessarily, but I would recommend at least 30 minutes for each party to present their evidence for a full and complete hearing to occur. Thank you.
Good morning, Commission. Steve Sprague, City Auditor. I've been asked to address the ownership manager issue and the server training with this facility. So when the license applicant was originally received, the applicants included Francis Brown and Corey Schultz. Francis Brown was not eligible to receive this license because of his criminal background history, which included, I believe it was in 2015, a felony charge. So subsequent to that time, the ownership group of the African International Nightclub signed a document, which I've laid on your podium up there, where Francis Brown is saying that he is going to remove himself as the owner and manager, and that Marlboro Brown would be appointed as the new manager, and she was also listed as an owner of the license. So we move forward, and subsequent renewal information that we received, which is also in the packet, shows that Mr. Brown continued to list himself as the manager, and in the correspondence with the police that you'll hear later, identified himself as the manager of the facility. If you remember the meeting on July 1st, the attorney Stephen Baird then represented that he was the manager, or the general manager. And then later, Daniel Amani, I believe that was July 12th, we actually got a notification, something in writing that said that he has been appointed manager. So the point of all of that is that it's been very confusing for us to know who we're supposed to be communicating with. And we should, the communication should have been directly to the owners, which the meeting with the ownership group, Corey Schultz and Marlboro Brown, took place on July 12th. And so there was a period of time there where, they were telling us that this person's in charge, and and we didn't have anything in writing, and so that made it very difficult to communicate. So I've also included in the packet the background checks on Francis Brown, Marlboro Brown, and Corey Schultz. The recommendation from the Liquor Control Board on July 19th of 2019 was to deny the issuance of the license. The City Commission found otherwise, and did issue the license. So now the issue of the employee roster. We do have a payroll record that was submitted by the parties involved, dated in December of 2020. Of that, there were 21 people listed, and we were only able to identify 4 people of that list that were server trained. Now, it is possible that these people are not in the service of the alcohol. Maybe they're kitchen staff or something like that. It wouldn't be required to have server training. We weren't able to drill down and find out exactly what their roles were, but we just wanted to make note of that. Also, with their renewal, they listed 4 employees on their roster, and only 2 of those people had completed server training. And I guess the rest of that packet just includes the designation of Daniel Omani as the representative, and then they did include some proposed changes to operations if they were allowed to resume operating. And then I have copies of the notice of hearings that was originally scheduled for August 4th, and then we expedited the hearing to have that hearing today. At this point, that's all that I have.
Good morning, Commissioners. Just to set the stage a little bit for this, again, so everyone's got the full context of what's been happening. As you know, about 4 months into my tenure is when we started identifying a gap in the reporting of liquor violations and issues. This particular establishment was one that kind of came to the forefront as we were reorganizing the Liquor Control Board and department processes to ensure that there was adequate communication from the line level up to our elected officials for these particular oversight purposes. Since the special meeting and suspension, we have met with the group from Africa Club a couple of different times to discuss the issues and attempt to identify areas of consensus. So I've brought with me also, as I go through the presentation today, a number of officers who were at some of these particular incidents in the event that the commission has any particular questions about the incident itself to help clarify for you. First, before I start, I also want to correct the record on one issue. The party bus situation from May 29th that I reported to you, the Liquor Control Board and the special meeting on July 1st, through additional investigation and at the request of Mr. Omani from one of our meetings, we looked into this a little further, and there was miscommunication on that particular issue in terms of whether they were going to or coming from the Africa Club. So it appears that they were not coming from the Africa Club, so we're going to retract that piece of information from our presentation. However, that was not the most significant piece in terms of our public safety concerns about operations of the club, but I did want to clarify that record for you before you begin any deliberations. I want to go back again and start with February 14th, 2021 at 1:39 a.m. Officers responded to an active fight between 8 individuals in the parking lot of the club. None of those individuals wished to pursue charges. There were no injuries. However, during the incident, officers observed individuals in the club past bar closing, also being served alcohol past bar closing. There was a security guard who was obstructing the officers' investigation of the fight as well. And so part of our process early on, even prior to my tenure, was that officers were assigned as liaisons to some of these establishments. So I'm going to ask Officer Lachlan Vera to come up and explain to you what his liaison relationship was, his regular contacts he had with Manager Francis Brown, and the types of advice that he gave him. As it came up in some of our meetings, that there was a feeling that appropriate warnings or knowledge or guidance hadn't been given to the management of the club. And so we want to present what's been done so you have a full understanding. Officer Vera, could you come up, please?
Hello, I'm Officer Lachlan Vira. I'm the liaison officer for the Africa Nightclub. I've had that position since the beginning of August 2020. Since then, some of my duties include each month I send up a summary report for the calls for service that occur at the Africa Nightclub. What that entails is each time officers get dispatched there and the address is listed as the Africa Nightclub, and they respond and deal with whatever incident it is. I type up a summary of that incident, whether a report was completed as a result of it, or if it was just information added. I put this all into a document, as well as also document how many bar checks we do there during that month. I send it out to the officers and supervisors in that area, and then I also provide a copy to Mr. Brown. Also, I do some follow-up as far as if we have incidents occur, or if we issue a liquor establishment incident form. I usually do some follow-up and meet with Mr. Brown to discuss some of those problems and how we could go forward and progress from there. Another thing that I've also provided is some recommendations or some advice to improve security, as in April 29th, I sent an email, about a 2-page email discussing security operations. Nothing that was telling him what to do, just more or less recommendations and advice, since that's something he was looking for his security staff. I've also completed some other reports as far as when we had, during the COVID pandemic, as far as some violations through there, and discussed how we can improve that. And pretty much everything there is entailed. Yep. So I guess I can hit on the security operation email that I sent to Mr. Brown. I meant to meet in person with the security team, but I was unable to due to calls for service taking them on the street. The topics that we discussed, or that I emailed to him, involved security at the entrance and exit, how some ideas to properly man that could be improved as far as checking IDs, and he's also done some security checking as far as like for weapons and patting individuals down. So I provided some advice on that. One big thing that we obviously have dealt with was minors in the liquor establishment. And one big thing to help combat that would be that ID scanner. So I discussed with him how the best way to combat that, since he has that ID scanner, is to use it for every single ID that, or every single person, to provide an ID and scan every single ID, not skipping anyone, because then he keeps a list of it for his own records. As far as for people that he's trespassed in his own system, it'd flag those. Also, if it was a fake ID, it would obviously catch that. That would help prevent that. And then also a thing we discussed was if someone's friend provided them an ID, say an individual is 20 years old, and they have a 21-year-old friend that may kind of look similar to them, since that tends to happen in some areas, and they provide them that ID. Obviously, if that's scanned, that's a real ID. But if the individual doesn't look of age, then security could ask further questions such as providing an address, date of birth, showing other documentations of like credit cards that have the other names on there. And then ultimately, as a private business, being able to turn away individuals that, or patrons that they don't believe should be allowed into the liquor establishment. Some other things we discussed was reviewing like cameras at the doors if he suspects any employees of letting people through without following Mr. Brown's proper policies and procedures that he discussed with me. Some other things I've done, I've met in person and had meetings with Mr. Brown, not on a scheduled basis, but probably about every other month we've met. Some other things I've done is talk about the surrounding businesses and meeting with like the property management who manages the businesses around the African Nightclub.
Thank you, sir. As a result of the violations for having persons in the establishment after hours, which was observed by our officers at this February 14th meeting, Mr. Brown pled guilty on May 7th, 2021 to that violation, which was agreed to in the plea agreement to be an infraction rather than a Class B misdemeanor, which it would otherwise be. Moving forward from there, I personally met with Mr. Brown on March 11th and his legal counsel and some of his other team to discuss similar issues that Officer Vira had talked about in terms of security, getting an ID scanner, etc. And they seemed rather open to that and apparently did purchase an ID scanner. Moving forward to April 2nd of 2021 at 10:58 p.m. Our officers were dispatched to an intoxicated female who reported that there were underage kids in the club and then hung up on the dispatcher. The officers spoke with the owner of the club, who said they had to remove a very intoxicated female from the club. He told the officers that they were very good about scanning all IDs and making sure to remove any minors or anyone who causes problems. On April 3rd at 11:01 p.m., we were again sent back there for a loud party. Again, officers spoke with management and advised them to turn down their bass, which was affecting neighboring homes. On April 11th at 12:09 a.m., we were again sent back there for a disturbance. This involved a dispatch received a call from someone. There was a lot of yelling and screaming on the line. Officers arrived on scene and found out the female complainant was upset with the club because she was getting asked to leave. She claimed she was assaulted at the club on a prior date but did not want to contact police about it. Management requested she leave and she was subsequently trespassed. On April 24th at 12:34 a.m., we were sent there for a female in a parking lot discharging a firearm in the air in an attempt to stop individuals involved in a physical domestic. Officers responded to this call. There were multiple individuals involved in a large fight in the parking lot. 2 arrests were made, one for aggravated reckless endangerment and another male for felony preventing arrest. Multiple of the people were trespassed. As a result of this investigation, we determined that there was a male inside who was 20 years of age. That case was initially sent to the state prosecutor because of the felony investigation. The state's attorney's office has decided that they weren't going to do that, address that particular violation, but in order to safeguard the criminal investigation, that case wasn't sent over to the city prosecutor until recently, so that will be an underage violation that will be reviewed by the prosecutor. But we do have a 20-year-old who was in the bar at that time. And if there's any questions, we have an officer or two here that could corroborate that. At that time, too, Officer Vera actually had contact with Francis, again asking him about who's checking door at the IDs, and he identified someone by the name as Callie, but was not able to provide Officer Vera any other information, including a last name for his own employee. He never received any additional information regarding that particular incident. On May 23rd at 2:11 a.m., we were sent to a gunshot homicide scene at the outside of the club in the parking lot. Again, multiple officers responded to this particular situation. The victim was an alleged employed security guard by the club who was armed and was also a convicted felon. He was deceased at the scene. Throughout that investigation, our detectives conducted multiple interviews of Mr. Brown and others in the club to ascertain not only what happened in the homicide, but what type of operations were occurring in the club, who was there, that type of information. And as we expressed at the prior special meetings, we had a multitude of responses from Mr. Brown regarding who was employed, who was authorized to have guns, etc. So I have Detective Troy Hansen here who did most of those interviews. He's going to kind of walk through in a nutshell the variance of information we received regarding those particular issues. So Detective Hansen, would you come up, please?
Thank you, Chief. So like the Chief said, I'm Detective Troy Hansen. Through this investigation, there were some inconsistencies in regards to the employees. As far as employees that are armed as security in the course of business for the club, at what point initially Mr. Brown had told investigators that he had no armed security and nobody was armed inside the club. He had never seen anybody with guns inside the club. On a later date, after interviewing with Mr. Brown, talking about his business practices in security for the club, he indicated that after speaking with his lawyer, that he did have employees working as security that were armed, and only certain employees that were authorized by him, that were trusted employees, that were allowed to carry guns while working security for the club. What other topics do we have? Handling of guns. We do have one individual that indicated on the night of the shooting that their gun was checked in by the club and they were allowed admittance into the club, and then at the end of the night was given the gun back. However, we do have other statements from other employees that said they were unaware of anybody checking in any guns at the club. Other individuals that had been interviewed had indicated that they wouldn't bring the guns directly into the club, as Mr. Brown had security precautions set up where people were getting patted down, but they would stow their guns on the patio area and then later go out and retrieve them after getting into the club, going out a side door. Mr. Brown had indicated he did post security on his side door to try to prevent such acts. As far as the ID scanner, we found through our investigation, there were people that were scanned in, but we've also spoken with individuals that their names never appeared on the ID scanner, and individuals who indicated that if you were well known to the club, that they wouldn't bother scanning your ID. So while the ID scanner was being used, it wasn't being used for everybody. So from an investigative standpoint, didn't give us a complete list of everybody who was at the club on the night of the shooting. Oh, and one of the individuals that we were looking for regards to this investigation, we did determine that they were underage and had verified they were inside the club on the night of the shooting. So as part of this investigation, we began reviewing surveillance video inside the club at the time and after the shooting. And we were able to identify three people that appeared to have guns from the surveillance video inside the club that was after the shooting. I had spoken with Mr. Brown and brought a copy of those photos and asked Mr. Brown if those were his employees or if they were patrons to try to identify who they were in regards to this homicide investigation. Mr. Brown initially identified one of the photos as his head of security, as somebody that was armed. He was reluctant to provide the names of the other two until he could verify with them that it was in fact them from the photos. On a follow-up day, he did verify the other two were also employees of his that appeared to be armed inside the club after the shooting.
Oh, employee list? Did you get a roster?
As far as his employees, so purpose of our investigation was to identify who was all working at this club as potential witnesses who may have seen something. We had requested from Mr. Brown a list of his employees. This was difficult because what we had discovered through Mr. Brown is not all of his employees are on a payroll. In fact, his security is people managed by his head of security who he didn't necessarily have direct knowledge of who was working. So when requesting this information, he indicated that he could get us a list of people, but also stated that he would have to contact these individuals and then let us know on a later date who was in fact working. At this time, we have not received a list of all the employees that had been working at the club on the date of the homicide. And some of this what appeared to us as the difficulty of obtaining this list was that not everybody was on that payroll. Some people were being paid in cash, and some people were being paid by check through a normal payroll process. Oh, the employees, the chief asked how long it took to get the name of the employees for the photos that I had shown Mr. Brown of the individuals inside the club that had guns. It took about half a day. I had interviewed Mr. Brown on the evening, and I had to call him the next afternoon to get that the names from that. That was the date of, I believe, the first commission hearing on the liquor board license, and at the time, Mr. Brown was on his way here to the city commission for that hearing when I had spoken with him.
Which is about 2 weeks after the homicide.
Yes, I believe that was about 2 weeks after the homicide.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. The underage patron will be referred for charges as well from the result of the homicide, but again, until that investigation is completed, we aren't able to make the referral because we don't want to open up that homicide investigation to open records situation. And again, there was, as Detective Hansen said, multiple iterations of who the people in the photos were. You saw the photos last time. And from the video, we can see that at least one of them was pulling a gun from one of the refrigerators in the back, and the other ones, we don't know where they came from. Moving forward, on May 30th, we had some other disturbance calls at the tavern at 12:53 a.m. A woman saying she needed police, and it was at the club. Security said a female got into a verbal argument with her boyfriend, left in a cab before officers were able to contact them. That later turned up at another location as an assault. And then on June 27th and June 28th, we were again sent over to the Africa Club. This was leading up to the LCB meeting that occurred on the 29th. That was for a loud party on the 27th at 6:40 p.m. This was a citizen complaint about the loud music. Again, spoke with Francis, advising of the unnecessary noise ordinance, and had to have him turn that down. And on the 28th at 2 a.m., officers patrolling the area observed a male at the club yelling, holding another male back. They had to intervene and get this individual out of there. He later left in a vehicle. So the incidents really have occurred continually until such time as the Liquor Control Board, followed by the special meeting relative to the licensure of the tavern. I'm happy to take any questions regarding that, but I think the public safety concerns related to the operations of the tavern, both from underage patrons, improper use or use of the scanner or device, the disturbance calls, the potential over-intoxication issues there, and really the gun issues with the employees. I think we can all imagine how dangerous it is to have random people running through the tavern with guns as officers are responding to a shooting. And we have a manager who doesn't either know people have guns or then later determines weeks after the event who those people are. Doesn't really seem to be a very safe environment for the public or the.
Any questions of the chief by any of the commissioners? Thank you, Chief.
So, Mr. Chair, now we'll give, it was about a half hour, so we'll give you your opportunity. You can take as much time as you want, but it was about a half hour, but proceed.
Thanks for the help, Commissioner
All
Pepper.
right, thank you.
Yep, you know the agenda. That helps.
Yes.
And just for the public, identify yourself as you start
Yes,
speaking so people know, please.
Exactly. Kwame Omani, Daniel.
We'll pass it down. We've got one.
Yeah, you can just pass it along. I'm here today representing the African International Nightclub. It's with great sadness that I have to stand here in front of the commission today because I feel like our establishment is being picked on. The reason why we are here today is because of the claims that we broke the city law and we caused multiple disturbances. But the thing that I just sent to you guys now, as you may see there, shows all the disturbances caused for Club Africa within the whole year, from July of last year to July of this year. 15 total disturbances caused. To the windbreak, as you see over there, 60 total calls. To the Old Broadway and Fort Knox and the rest of them, over 500 calls in a year. So the claim of disturbance as being an issue here does not exist. When you see the package that I sent you guys have a package here. You can weigh it and see the differences. Okay, the chief stood here and pretty much nitpicked everything that has happened at the African bar and restaurant. He claims, first of all, there's a lot of emotions here, so I just want to take my time because as you can see on the list that I sent you guys there, there is multiple calls, disturbances, fights, gunshots at the Bismarck, many different places. And I don't see the owners or the managers in front of the commission today begging for their license to be reinstated. The chief also claimed we are a threat to public safety based on the incident that happened with the gunshots and the passing away of Mr. McNair. I'll get to that later, but I just want the commission to go through the list that I sent you guys to see the disturbances from Club Africa to the windbreak to the Old Broadway. And I want you guys to make that decision for yourself. I don't know if the chief is aware of that or not. Disturbances have never been an issue at Club Africa, and it shouldn't be an issue going forward as well. As far as a threat to public safety, I'll just touch on the most important things here. The chief stood here and talked about guns on the premises. Guns has never been an issue on the premises of Club Africa. What the chief didn't tell the commission is those 3 individuals that you saw on the screen with guns were security. There was a guy outside of there shooting at people. Security came in, checked the back door, the front door, make sure they were locked, and they had guns on them. They did not go out there. They did not do any shooting. They had nothing to do with what was going on. They were protecting the employees that were left in the establishment, as they should, because they are security. If the shooting goes on outside here and security is in here and they come in and lock the door and protect the people in here, that shouldn't be a crime. It shouldn't be a crime. So the chief is portraying it as people at Club Africa are walking around with guns and fridges, and what, that's not what it is. That's misrepresentation. And I also would like for the chief to make a correction to the commission about the place of the shooting, the area that the shooting took place. It did not take place on the establishment of Club Africa. And I want the chief to make that clear to the commission, because that's also misrepresentation of information. And also going back to the party bus incident that you just corrected yourself on after I brought it to your attention. What you did on July 2nd, you forced these individuals here, these elected officials, to make a decision that affected the establishment. So now that the suspension is already in place, and you going back and saying that you made a mistake, doesn't correct the fact. You are the chief, and you should present the right information first of all to them in making sure they make the right decision. You don't present false information to get your verdict, and then after the fact, you come back and correct yourself. We've lost a month of no service because of the decision that you took and the lies that you told the commission. So I would like for you to also apologize to that, because it's not fair, and you know that. Everything that you're talking about with minors, I can touch base on every single one of them. It's he say, she say. There hasn't been a citation issued to the club for a minor infraction in almost 2 years that the establishment has been open. There hasn't been any city or state laws broken. You talked about after hours selling of alcohol. That's a lie. You gave the establishment an infraction ticket because an employee took a shot at 2:02 after work. No one was selling liquor to anybody on the bar, because I was there. Personally, I seen it. And you made it as if we were selling liquor after hours. That was never the case. You also gave us an infraction ticket for having employees inside the establishment after 2 a.m. that you claim that everybody should be outside of the establishment and going home at 2 a.m., which is not possible because no bar operates on that under that circumstances. After the bar closes at 2, employees need to be there to clean up, to collect their tips, and to make sure the establishment is clean before they leave. So everything that you've laid forward to the commission and all the testimony that you're bringing along does not match the fact that we are a threat to public safety. We don't have employees walking around there with guns. The gun incident happened because there was a guy out there shooting at people. And security came in to protect the employees that were left on the premises. So you're saying that employees are inside there with guns and walking around with guns and storing guns in fridges? That's never the case, and that's never been the case. And you know that because you have our surveillance system with you. And you can go back weeks after weeks and check. If there's any other time that you can prove to the commission that you saw an employee, other than the day of the shooting, holding a gun on the premises, then you have a point. But if there's a shooting going on, employees coming to protect and the security comes in to protect the employees that are left on the premises, that is not a threat to community. That's not a threat to public safety issue. It's not. So you guys are suspending these licenses interimly because of disturbances of the peace and a threat to public safety and also breaking of city and state laws. You haven't proven to this commission what city and state law this establishment broke. You claim there are things that are going through the prosecutor's office and this and that, but nothing is materialized yet. But you can come here and sit here and lie to the commission to get the verdict that you want and then come after the fact and correct yourself, even though the decision has already been made already. That is not fair. To cut all that short here, I don't even want to continue on with this. We met with the city auditor. Remember that Steve, we met with the mayor. They came up with a few recommendations for us to make going forward. We changed our management team. We came up with new rules of operation. We came up with a code of conduct for security. We've done everything the city have asked us to do as of date. They did a background check on me. We brought everything that they asked us of. All we are asking for is a fair share. I don't think we have committed crimes that warrants us to lose our our liquor license. And I hope the commissioners agree with me on that because, like I said, disturbances is not an issue because we use the police force the least out of all these bars around town here. As you can see it, 15 calls, disturbances calls in a year, an average of 1 call a month. That's unheard of. I have a list here. Last month alone, the Windbreak called police almost 12 times for disturbances in just 1 month, compared to what Club Africa used in a whole year. We are not disturbing the peace. We are not using the police force excessively. And the chief knows that because everything that you see there came straight from the police dispatch log. It's a public file. Everybody can go in there and check. There are 99.9% of liquor licenses in this city is owned by a selected few, and you guys know who they are. The 0.001% that was owned by the black person is being under attack. Ask yourself that question. Why would that be the case? Why do we have to sit here and fight for that? We just elected Dr. Hogan to be the head of inclusion, and the first and second day that he's in office, you guys throw him a curveball with suspending Club Africa's liquor license. How is that fair to the man? We brought him on to be inclusion, but now you guys want to take us out of the liquor establishment business without any proper proof. It's all he says, she says. We interviewed this person said this person was in the club, that person said this person in the club. Recently, last week, they caught an underage person drinking at the windbreak. Guess how they found out? They came in, the individual was not inside the establishment, but he was in the parking lot. They saw a wristband on the individual's hand. That shows that he was inside the establishment. If the chief and his team can say they saw, we do give wristbands too for underage drinking. If you can see a wristband on anybody that you interview when you came to the establishment and they say they came from Club Africa, then you do have a point, but you don't, because those are all lies. Underage drinking has never been an issue at our establishment. Never. Over intoxication that you claim that people were actually urinating on party buses and that the party bus came from Club Africa that you just corrected yourself. That has never been an issue either. So why pollute the minds of the city commissioners to make a decision that will favor you and your recommendation that you brought to the table, that you claim that you did not bring the recommendation to the table? You need to explain to the city commissioners what you are really up to, Chief, because what you are saying to them is false, and there's an underlying something going on with you and why you want this liquor license taken away.
Can I go to a couple items? Understanding the facts and going back and forth. Has there been a background check on Daniel? Do we have any background check that's been done? And the second question to Steve, they've reapplied with their new officers and the new people. Are they compliant with those issues? Because we have two issues here, right? Is that Mr. Brown's not supposed to be running the club, and then you were going to reapply with a manager, security, and those items. Steve, do you have all that in hand?
We received part of the information that we requested. So when we met, we requested that the owners complete a background check again, essentially similar to applying for the license. There was a lot of hesitancy on their part, and they didn't want to do that. And then we said, well, we should at least get a background check on all the management team, and they did not want to do that. And so at that point, they said, well, we have a general manager, and everybody else on the management team reports to the general manager. Okay, then we should do the background check on the general manager. The typical information we get in an application, we do the background check on the general manager, but we're given information. We're giving where they've lived, where they've worked, different things like that. All I was able to get from Daniel was just the release form signed. So that's all I had. I did get that last Thursday, and I turned it over to the PD.
So if the commission had decided to give the license today, they really couldn't because we don't have the information you need. So Daniel, can you address that? Because here's the problem we have. There's some improper things about the old license, about who was who and different criminal background checks and all those things. We need to almost redo your license with who you have now in your management team. You do have a security plan, which you've showed the police chief, and I think we've looked at that. You have some principles and codes that are very good. But in order, Commissioner Pipcar, when you guys give the license, they have to have everything filled out, background checks, and it has to pass the muster before it even goes through liquor control. Is that correct? So we don't have that. So even if we decided to, he just said you don't have it.
Steve, you wanted a criminal background check, and I provided that information to you. That's the form that you gave us. What we didn't want to do is, Steve and the chief had recommended that we do a new liquor license application. And I said no to that. There's no need for us to do a new liquor license application. The reason why I said no to that is because we have an interim suspension of our license. We haven't had a hearing to tell our side of the story. So why should we reapply for a liquor license when we haven't even have a hearing on the previous one? That's what I said no to. So Steve, I would like for you to correct that fact. You know what we talked about. I came in your office multiple times. You said, Mr. Omani, I need a background check on you. I filled out the form, I gave it to you. You said that's what, I met with you multiple times. You said that was sufficient enough. So I don't appreciate the fact that you are letting the commission know that we are not cooperating with you. We said we are not redoing the license application again because it's not necessary. The background check information has been sent to Steve a long time ago. They already have the background already. So I don't see what the problem is here, Steve.
I'm just trying to tell you, Danny, we don't have the information we have, and it was a decision after the suspension that would have to be reapplied to that. You're resistant to do that, but this board can make the decision today on what it wants to do. It may be implied that you will have to do a reapplication because the present one doesn't seem to have the right people on the license. So I'll let the commission make its decision, but I warn you, because you do not have the new application in, it is going to be problematic for us to reopen your license.
So you want us to do a new liquor license application?
Mr. Brown can't manage the company. We know that. You've inserted,
Mr. Brown is no longer there.
I know, but you've inserted yourself in that position. We have your name and, what is it, phone number, but we don't have any background check on him, right? On Daniel Amani?
I did present everything
No,
to
there's
them.
no background check because they didn't have the information we need. And we need you to be cooperative and give us the information we can have so we can do the things the right way. You're not fearful of having a background check, things will be fine, but they have not done that. So your license wouldn't qualify because your background check is not done.
Can I ask Steve a
Go ahead.
question? Steve, do you not have everything on my background?
The only information that I was given was the release form, which allows, and I turned that over to PD. And that's all I had. I didn't have the application. I didn't have his name and address. The address is on the release form. So we had that. But typically when we get an application, we're looking at where have you worked the last 5 years, where have you lived the last 5 years.
So why didn't you give me that form to fill out for you? I told you, give me whatever you need me to do, and you gave me the forms, and I filled them out and returned them to you. Mr. Mayor, that packet was never presented to me. He told me, Mr. Mann, this is what you need to fill out, and I filled it out and I returned it to him. Nobody ever said anything about doing any other form of application.
Okay? So that would have to be fixed, right?
Yeah.
Commissioners, any questions of Daniel? Commissioner
Chairman.
Preston?
So how long have you been functioning in the role of the manager? And there was an individual in that role
Mr.
before
Bird.
you.
Yep.
What happened?
Mr. Bird, the day, I believe it was on the 2nd, when the special meeting was held here, I met with the owners and we decided to release him of his duties because he was responsible for the business management part of it, him and his wife. His wife was doing a little bit of accounting. So to me, it was a little bit of a conflict of interest, so we have to release him of his duties.
And the manager before Mr. Baird?
You mean Francis Brown? Yeah, Francis Brown was managing the establishment at that time.
Daniel, you want to present anything else?
I wanted the chief to also make one correction that he's been sending the wrong information to the media about that the shooting that did happen did not happen on the establishment properties. It happened on the other side of the property. And I want the chief to correct that because he said it to the media. And when Corey and myself called him when we heard the news to make that correction, the chief said, "What do you want me to do about it?" His exact words.
I thought today, Chief, when you presented, you said the shooting was in the parking lot.
Yes, it was in the parking lot adjacent to the club, which.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Adjacent to the club. It did not happen on the establishment.
But like he said, it's in the parking lot next to the club.
Yeah, but that is not on the establishment.
We agree.
Okay.
We agree. We agree.
All right. So I just want to make sure you correct that with the news as well. And also, I got one more thing that I needed to present to you guys here. I went and checked the crime data rate for the city of Fargo for March, April, and May. And as I see here, the biggest issue, because the chief has said that there was an increase of crime in the area and that we are a threat to public safety, but I haven't seen any trend whatsoever showing that. Okay. Now, for the chief to call for a special meeting, which I don't remember, Mr. Mayor, if you remember the last time you guys called for a special meeting, or the last time a liquor license was in jeopardy was about 2 decades ago, 20 years ago. So what significant did the chief see that we do not see that warrant for him to call a special meeting to get this license suspended 2 days before the 4th of July? He hasn't proven that to the commission yet to warrant that suspension. So that, just like I asked you in the closed door meetings, what did the chief see that was so damning that he needed to bring a special meeting a day after the liquor board meeting to get the license suspended?
Commissioner Preston.
So previously, it sounds like the security personnel weren't on the payroll. Are they on the payroll now? And has that list been provided?
Yes.
Can you tell me, and Steve, maybe you can answer this, do security personnel, are they required to have server training?
No, I don't think so.
Security personnel would not be required to have server training. Server training is required of people that serve the
Okay,
alcohol.
directly served. So can you tell me the reason that, because one of the violations is that your staff hasn't come through server training. Can you,
That's never been the issue. There was no violation whatsoever for that. What the chief and the city were claiming that we didn't have everybody on payroll. So what I did is I sent a list to Steve and Nancy of about 27 to 32 people that we have on our payroll that were all getting paid with checks. Because people were saying people were getting paid under the table and everything going around the news that, oh, nobody's on payroll. So I had to get that straight. I sent the list to Steve and to Nancy. The other allegation where we were not buying our liquor from vendors that we were buying from just the normal liquor store. And I have to set that straight. We order from beverage wholesalers, Beckset Brothers, Johnson Brothers also. Everything that we are doing is by the book. We are not breaking any laws whatsoever. That's why it's so alarming to me that we have to stand here today to defend our license. Because everything that the chief had presented, nitpicking calls that came in that the person hang up, those are all normal calls that happen in all liquor establishments around town. As you can see there, there's 600 calls that went onto the 0 block of Broadway all the way to the 500 block of Broadway. In a year, 500 disturbances calls. If we were to sit here today and nitpick every single one of those calls, you guys would be overwhelmed. There are people throwing rocks in windows, gunshots going off at the Bismarck, people getting shot. We lost one of our own people. He got shot and killed, our own. And now we are being blamed for that? Because the chief showed a picture of 3 security guys holding guns, going and checking to make sure that the front and the back doors are locked so that the person who's doing the shooting don't come in there? And you guys want to blame us for having guns on the property? And even with that being said, it says on here that the proprietor has the right to allow guns in the building. If the manager seems, because he's collecting money, he can have a designated security person with a gun on the property. That's not breaking any law. That's not breaking any law at all. The three, like I said, if the chief can prove he has a surveillance system on him, any other time other than the day of the shooting, that he would see security walking around with guns in the property, then he has a point. But he cannot, because that has never happened. We were in uncharted waters when that happened, and security reacted based on what they were, the actions, I mean, the things that were around them. You hear gunshots right now, and somebody is protecting this place, they will come in and make sure the doors are locked and that everybody is safe in case somebody comes in here with a gun. There's no laws were broken here.
Commissioner Pipcorn, you had a question?
So I don't have a question, I have a statement. Actually, laws were broken. Convicted felons holding guns, that is breaking the law. And that's what we have here. The gentleman that was killed was a convicted felon, and he had a gun.
To my knowledge, I had no idea about that because
Anyway.
because let me finish this. For just 1 second. He was released off his duties at 2 a.m. The shots were heard at 2:11. He was in the parking lot. What the chief didn't explain to you is they were shooting a music video on the parking lot on the other side of the establishment, and he was standing there watching the music video when the gunshots went off. When you leave our establishment and you go to your car, whatever you do outside of there is up to you. If he went to his car to go grab a gun, nobody from the establishment sent him to go grab a gun. Nobody told him to have a gun on him. When we closed at 2 a.m., 11 minutes after we closed is when this incident happened. Everybody was off duty at that time, except for the individuals that were inside the property, that were cleaning up and getting ready to leave. And whether he's a convicted felon or not, when he leaves our establishment, whatever he does with himself is up to him. If he wants to go grab a gun from his car and go and walk around the neighborhood, that's up to him.
Commissioner Pipcorn?
I just think the minimum that I would recommend is that we have background checks on the management team. We also need to see a plan of who the security is instead of just a random group of people, because I think that's obviously what happened. They didn't even know the last names of some of the security people, and so that's what I would recommend. The very minimum is to do the background checks on everybody. And then also all the servers have to go through server training. That's the minimum, but I guess I'm looking forward to the other commissioners' comments. But to give you an example, so when we first, if you don't mind going back in history, 2019 is when it went through liquor control. Dave Todd was the chief, and he was not in favor of it. And Steve Sprague also voted not in favor of it. Tony and I were both on the commission, on the liquor control, and then we voted it on the commission. We voted unanimously. And what I would say is we gave them an opportunity. We went against the wishes of some of the city staff and obviously the police, and it was because of the felony convictions of the ownership. And so we gave them an opportunity, and so that's the way I look at it. And to me, they've squandered their opportunity. And to try to blame the chief, you have no one to blame but yourself. Look in the mirror. It seems like you're throwing rocks at everyone else. No. But I'm just saying, at the very minimum, we have to have them go through, because what they should have been doing now with this time was to do the background check. And we had a meeting, and they basically said they weren't willing to do that. And so, to me, that's the very minimum that we need to do. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Can I respond to that, Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
Can I respond? Okay. We are not blaming anybody. We've trusted the chief to be the head of the police department. So whenever he brings information to the commission or to the liquor board, it should be genuine. It should be legit. It shouldn't be fabricated police reports. That's against the city law, the code of conduct, that to willfully lie, provide false testimony, provide misleading information, or falsify written or verbal communication in reports when information may be relied upon by the court, by the state attorney, or by law enforcement, is a crime. And that's what you did, Chief. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just stating the facts. Because the information that you presented to the commission is what aided them in making the decision to suspend our license. So, Mr. Peppercorn, I'm not blaming the chief. I'm just stating facts. I'm stating facts. We've been in existence for 18 months. For 18 months, we have nearly 20 disturbances caused in 18 months. That's incredible. Check any other liquor establishment and see how many disturbances caused they've had in the 18 months period. And we have over 200-300 people in our establishment every Saturday. We are able to control the crowd. We cater to ourselves. Club Africa is not just the club, it's a cultural center. That's where all Africans come to meet each other. We eat good food there, we listen to our music there. We have no other place in this whole state that does that. Only Club Africa, the only place that any African in this town. We make up 8% of the population here. About 17,000 African Americans and Africans live in the city of Fargo. Not one single nightclub for us. Not one. So why is it necessary for the one that we have to be under attack based on the chief saying somebody called the phone and hanged up? Police came in and checked. I don't even know why that would be information that's worth expressing to the commission to hear. Just because you want to build a case. But you can build a case, but make sure the facts are right. It's not an issue or a disturbance if somebody call 911 and hang up and you go and you check and you don't find anything. You don't need to bring that to the commission. Because I went through the list that you have here. The problem with the city here, as I look at it, is crime against society and whatnot. We have a big problem with drugs and drug equipment. There's about 900 to 1,000 calls a month on that. Disorderly conduct that you claim, for the month of March, there was 8 total disturbances caused. But the month of April, there were about
Daniel,
17.
you made your point on that. Let's get a discussion here so we can decide what to do. So I'd like you to stay at the podium in case some of the commissioners want to ask you questions.
Okay.
So Commissioner Strand or Garrick, would you like to take the podium? Go ahead. Mr. Garrick.
Chief, he's claiming 18 months, 20 phone call or 20 calls for service. Is that the true number?
No, it's not. I think I covered almost 15 here today. So that was just in that period, February through May, some of the highlights. So I'm not certain where you got the information from. And I think we've had discussions about calls for service and their contextual relevance to an establishment.
Okay. Because, at the last meeting I asked you if this establishment takes up a lot more time than the average place. And you said yes at that meeting. And now we're hearing something different. So I just want to make sure that we're all on understanding. But
Commissioner, quick question. I have the list right in front of you.
I see it.
And you can, okay.
So one thing I'll agree with you on, if we do take some sort of action here today and suspend or revoke your license, we should absolutely be looking at other establishments as well. But that doesn't negate or mitigate what's happening at your club. The fact that there's other problems that we need to address is true, and we should, and I hope that we will. But this is part of that, I think, as well. So we can agree on that, at least partially. One thing that concerns me a little bit was in the packet here we have changes to business operations, changes. And one of them is strictly no minors allowed in the nightclub. That shouldn't be a change. It says no over-serving or over-consumption. That shouldn't be a change. All bottle services will be delivered directly to the table and not handed over the counter. Again, shouldn't be a change. Patrons will be allowed to stay inside the bar, won't be allowed to stay inside the bar up to 2 a.m. Again, strictly no firearms permitted on the establishment. Security will clear the property. Okay, that's fine. Security will be in some sort of uniform. Employees will be on the payroll. These shouldn't be changes.
They are not changes. This is what the city recommended that I should put on paper, and that's what we did. I want to get this clear because before I did that list, I did send payroll to Nancy and Steve. They are not changes. They just wanted me to state these things to present to you
Garrick,
guys.
I apologize. What we had asked Daniel to do is write a list of what we sat down and talked, and we wanted him to articulate what we both agreed upon.
Okay.
So when he has all these listings, you're exactly right. No minors should be in there, but we wanted him to spell it out. So
Okay.
it
So
wasn't
it
really
wasn't
a,
like we
a
went
change in
doing it.
business operation, but we wanted to make sure when the chief talked to him, here's what we expect in a bar, and we said, please write it down. So what
Yes.
Dan was trying to do is reflect that, and we also did the last call for alcohol at 1:30. So we put some other things in there, and we also explained, they didn't have to clear the parking lot. The parking lot the patrons should leave on their own, and/or police force will come at 2:30 if they need to get the lot cleared out. So what we had asked when we had these is we wanted the management to write out what they
exactly.
heard from the chief, heard from Steve and Nancy, and then put it in a document. So I
Okay.
apologize if it looks like they say changes.
It says right on top, so yeah.
right.
Bottom line is, whatever action we take here today, it'll set the tone for what we do with the other establishments. So, and with the understanding that if we do something here, there will be more action, I'm fine with that. But if we take action here and nothing else happens with the other establishments, I agree with him that that's unjust.
Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. What I would like to see is the background checks. If you've indicated that you've given permission to do these background checks, let's do it. Let's get it done with. How long does that take? And who's in charge of that? I'd like to know who's going to handle that and how soon.
Chief Lesbowski, how long would it take to do background checks on this team, 20 people?
Well, the forms have to be filled out that the auditor has for those persons. Once we have those returned to us, then we could have someone work on that immediately. But we did not receive that information. So that's kind of where we're, basically, we can't move forward on that particular item. And they need to clearly define who their management team is.
And I'm okay with that, but let's expedite. Let's find out who their management team is. Steve, as the auditor, if you can make sure that they get those forms correctly, and then let's have an immediate meeting to make sure or not if they've qualified. I don't want to assume they won't pass a background check, but I want to see that they do, and urgently.
We could possibly do that over a week to 10 days, Chief, you think, honestly? I mean, almost by next commission meeting?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Okay.
And one comment I'd like to make, Mayor, is that the importance of having the owners fill out the background check is that time has gone by and things happen over time. And so that's the importance of having the two owners that are listed agree to letting us do the background check on them again. If nothing's happened, it'll come back just like it did before. It'll be clean. It won't be a concern. But over time, things can happen. And so, that's the importance of having everybody done and not just, one person.
Danny, would you have the two owners stand up and introduce them to us, please?
Corey is not available today, but Ms. Brown is available.
Okay,
But
thank you.
the thing here, it seems like Steve is more concerned about the owners doing a background check, or you guys want all 27 employees to do background checks, because I'm not clear what's going on here. You want the owner's background check? You want the employee's background check? You want management background check? Or you want the whole team of owners, management, employees? What are we? I'm still confused here.
In a typical application setting, we would have the owners and the manager, the general manager.
So you need 3 background checks, the general manager and the two owners.
If I could,
You're saying, Steve, if he gives you the two owners background check and the manager, Daniel's the manager, that's 3 people. If it's a management team, and Daniel, you mentioned a management team, do you want the rest of the team members?
Typically, we don't get background checks when there's like general manager and, here's the kitchen
Okay.
manager and here's the security manager.
And I think Commissioner Pipcorn brought up a concern about security, so I think we probably would add, we'd want security, because there were some concerns that some people were felons that were being bouncers, and we really don't want felons working, Dave, right, as bouncers, especially carrying guns. I suppose, Chief, you'd have to correct me on this, but they could work as bouncers if they didn't carry a gun, right?
sure, I think the suggestion was, and they have already said that they would be hiring a bonded security firm. So that would ensure that those people were already properly background and had some level of training and were bonded and certified by the state versus hiring folks on an individual
So,
basis.
Steve, would we have to see that contract as well, that he have the contract, so the bouncers are covered? Was that something that would go in the packet?
That would be up to the commission. It's something that's outside of our normal arrangements.
Commissioner Strand?
Thank you, Mayor. We just saw a video of another bar in town where a supposed security person was pounding a guy out into the pavement or on the sidewalk. Do we have their background check?
Nope.
Do we require it?
So, Mr. Chair, I think talking about that, we have no context for that video, and to claim that as anything, we have no idea what was going on, and so I don't think that's appropriate.
I'll continue. My point is we need to be consistent.
Yes.
and treat everybody
Thank you.
absolutely the same.
Thank you, sir.
And that's all I care, is where we're consistent and everybody's treated equally.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that statement.
Mr. Preston.
And to touch base
I-
on that, that video is being investigated by the chief at the moment. So, Mr. Pepcorn, that is a video that is being under investigation, and the chief can speak on that if he wants.
Yep.
I agree fully with that. The trouble is, this is the case that's in front of us. We've got the evidence on this particular case. So I say, let's focus on this one and then get the process fixed, because I agree. I certainly do not support giving a license back at this point. And the reason is, there seems to be a pattern of managers being turned over with no notification, no background checks being done. And I would worry that even though Mr. Ramon, or I apologize if I'm not.
It's okay, Mr. Omani.
Okay, pronouncing your last name quite right. No assurances that indeed in 3 months, you're still going to be in that position. There's a history of going through managers here. So, boy, there's a lot of the ID scanner, not using the ID scanner appropriately or consistently. There's a number of things here that are real concerning to me that shows a pattern of mismanagement, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and to touch base on that, Francis Brown has been the manager for the past 18 months.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Francis Brown has been the manager for the past 18 months since the
Yes.
establishment was open.
And to be honest
Mr.
with
Bird
you,
took over.
that was not supposed to happen with the application as it came through. He was to not be the manager, and that's a huge problem.
I didn't know about that. I know he didn't qualify as an owner, but the wife being the owner and him being attached to the wife, I think it was appropriate that he oversees a few of the things that were happening at that time. And not to cut you short as well, Mr. Bird just assumed the managerial position for a day or two until we found out there was going to be a conflict of interest. That's why we let him go.
Mr.
So-
Sprague, who was listed as the general manager on the initial application when Mr. Brown pulled his ownership?
If you'll give me just a minute to find the
Okay.
original application.
It's in the packet.
And I would just want to also follow out on Mr. Strand's comment that all these liquor establishments in town, have they all done a background check on the management team? Because I asked that question in our closed door meeting and nobody could answer me. Just so we make sure that we have a fair level playing field for everybody. So if we are going to do it, and we expect the owner, the management team of the Old Broadway, the Windbreak, the Bismarck, everybody's supposed to go through the same thing. But I feel like it would be unfair to us. We have already lost a month of no service.
Mr. Chair, can I answer that? That's the Liquor Control Board. That's, we do background checks for all, when you issue a license, that's part of what we do. And so that's how we do it. And so I once again, I would support what we're doing here, requiring them to go through and do a new round of background checks. And I think that's a pretty legitimate request. And so if they comply, the frustrating thing is we asked them to do this at this meeting and they did not want to do it, which is fine, but then that's what's slowing this process down. Thank you.
Mr. Pepcorn, what we said we wouldn't do is the brand new application for a liquor license. We never said no to background checks. And Steve can be a witness to that. We never said no to background checks. We said it was not necessary for us to reapply for another liquor license.
We'll straighten all that out as we go here. We're going to close the public part of this, and we're going to go into deliberation now what to do. So, Daniel, I appreciate what you've told us, and I seriously want you to work real hard with Steve to get whatever he needs. It may not be really considered reapplication. It is a reforming of what you're doing because you're taking over as manager. That's different. You're doing some different things. That's different. So when we say reapplication, you're putting in the new people that are part of it, and they need background checks. They need the things that we do with every other bar in town. So we just need you to comply with that. The delay in the license will be is how fast we can get that done. So you need to move on that. Commissioner Gary.
We are building a precedence here. So if this comes up again, we need to act the same way. So what I believe we should do is suspend the license until such time as a reapplication is done. So we're not taking it back from the city. We're not gonna make you go and spend $100,000 again, but we're suspending it until such time as the full background, not just the background check, the full application process. Because doing just a background check, you're gonna miss this, miss that, let's just do it over again. Obviously, all new management is happening here, which is good, and it's what needs to happen. And we do background checks on management staff in all these establishments, everyone that comes to us. So that's my motion, is to suspend the license until a reapplication is complete and approved by Liquor Control and the City Commission.
In that motion, is it presumed that if that application comes in and as Steve says, everything is here, their license comes back?
I think we have to vote on that. It's a reapplication.
So do you want to wait till the new application comes? So all you're saying is today, does they need to get all that in for us to consider to give their license? Because they're suspended for 60 days.
I say suspended until such time as the new application is approved by Liquor Control and the City Commission.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Strand?
Why would we require a new application? We suspended, excuse me. We suspended them for 60 days. They're given an opportunity to comply. If they comply, they've complied. Why would we require a new license? I don't understand that. It's a penalty beyond the reason. And we don't do this to other establishments. So consistency is critical, but we suspended them for 60 days. We gave them a chance for a hearing. We're hearing this today. We're clarifying what the needs are to qualify to reopen and the terms of reopening. That's our focus. If we're going to start going down the path of every time there's an infringement of requiring liquor licenses, new applications, I'm not up for that.
Mr. Chairman?
John, maybe it's clarifying the application might be a better term, but Francis Brown cannot manage it. So Daniel Omani has to manage it.
Get
It has to
Mr.
change.
Omani's
We don't
background
have,
check.
Yeah, I'm willing to do an application on myself and my background check, like I said.
we
no
don't have a
problem.
background
No,
check on them, so
no,
maybe
no,
it's
no.
putting the new players in.
Yeah, but
But it's-
nobody,
but it's-
Mr. Mayor,
But it's
nobody
what-
in the
excuse me, please,
ownership
Daniel,
is.
let me finish.
Okay.
But they have to put in place who the people are that we're having going forward. So the owners don't change.
Okay.
The two owners that own it haven't changed. But Steve, do you have background checks on the two owners?
Yes.
That were completed at the time that the license was originally issued.
So we do have that, so it's really the new management team. So in a sense, it's not a reapplication, it's re-putting out the form, I think is what John's thinking. Yes, okay. Commissioner Preston.
So I would not feel comfortable even reissuing after or re-allowing the establishment to open up again unless we have a system in place to monitor what's going on, to make sure that the management is clear and that it is Mr. Romani. Is there a possibility of doing that? And maybe that's a Nancy question. I don't know. Steve, Nancy?
Nancy Morris, please answer that question.
I don't know that I can answer that question. I'm not in the business of operating a bar. So I would say that I think that just having the checks and balances that are in place as the operation, if it does reopen under new management and approved by the City Commission, that there would be those checks and balances that are in place for all other establishments as well.
What checks and balances are you talking about?
Just the compliance checks, the things that are in the ordinance, the underage serving, the over-serving, the disturbances, breach of peace, information regarding, who may have guns as employees of the establishment and how those are set up.
Chief Lebowski is your liaison officer, also, in a sense, when she's asking this, maybe perhaps more visits, maybe perhaps continuing to work with their management team to make sure that they keep in compliance?
Well, we will, of course, continue to work with the management team. That's not really ever been an issue. We've attempted to work with them in a number of different ways. What has some of the issues that we're talking about here in terms of licensure and who's actually running it have been a lot of the issues. We can't put on an application that I'm going to be the manager and then tomorrow it's somebody else. And so I think that particular type of scrutiny is necessary. I agree with Commissioner Strand in terms of fairness, but you also have to look at circumstances. And so the circumstances to this incident are different than what's going on in other establishments, and we do have a new process underway. I will be bringing forward some establishments tomorrow at the Liquor Control Board that have similar issues and discussing that with the board for potential action. So I guess to the fairness question, we're doing everything we can as quickly as we can to implement this new process and ensure fairness for everyone. But we also have to look at the circumstances in these particular instances that I think may require additional requirements based on what's happened. And as we move through that, if we can find compliance and we don't have future issues, we can certainly revisit and retract some of those restrictions.
Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, I'd like to also acknowledge you're new to town, relatively speaking, and so we all know we've established this expectation of our new police chief. We've had a snowballing effect of concerns in our liquor industry that are getting us to this point where I think our level of scrutiny is heightened. And your entity just happens to maybe be the first. So I hope we're not thinking you're being targeted because there are others, but to give him a little defense, this is our expectation of the police chief. We've reinvented the Liquor Control Board also to address these issues. This gives us an opportunity to work these wrinkles out while still going forward and to hold everybody accountable equally, all establishments. So my concern back to today is, as far as from my perspective, I would like to immediately see, as soon as we're able to, the background checks that we're requiring of everybody, and then to have us get reported from our auditor's office and police department if they have any concerns. And if those concerns exist, then we need to know. And if those concerns don't exist, let's expedite getting them back in business. There's a hardship to being shut out of business. There's a cost. There's a harm to them and to our community. And I don't want the mindset to be out there that we're treating people differently. We have to treat everybody equally. We have to give you an opportunity to reestablish your good name and your reputation and to get back on track to do what you do. But
Thank you.
I think that's important.
Thank you very much.
Any other discussion? Commissioners, any other comments? Roll call vote, please.
What's the motion, Mayor?
Shelley, can you repeat the motion?
I have to suspend the liquor license until the reapplication is complete and approved by the Liquor Control Board
And City Commission.
and the City Commission.
Clarify, it's already suspended.
Until,
Until,
and it's suspended now until, well, right now it's 60 days. So
It would go 60 days, John. If you want to expedite getting them sooner, then we would re-meet and have this discussion to vote.
but we're 30 days into the 60 already. Aren't
As
we?
soon as the chief can get it, we can call emergency meeting. I'm not averse.
That's what I'd recommend.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Nancy?
Excuse me, if I could clarify. There was an intermediate, immediate suspension pending the hearing with a finding of cause, but the recommendation for Liquor Control Board was 60 days. So at this time, the question is, do you want to continue a suspension for a period of time? So it has a 60-day suspension has not been imposed by this body.
So his motion would basically say they're still suspended until they've done their reapplication. That's not 60 days. That could be another 2, 3, 4 weeks. But as soon as you get everything done and set back up, they could become off the suspension. I think that's Tony's intent. So they will continue suspension until those paper forms are done. And then we can call an emergency meeting and give them back their pull suspension.
Mr. Chair, it also liquor control, it goes through that first and then it comes to the city commission.
Yep. And they could, Dave, you could do emergency meeting for that as well.
Absolutely.
Yep, okay. Now are we clarified?
Yes, thank you.
Roll call vote, please.
Gary?
yes.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Preston?
Aye.
Strand?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye. Any other business for this commission? Move to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.